what I thought I'd do today, we got 2 hours to demo, or I do. Somebody had asked me about a horse head, so I thought what I'd do is I'd do it's relatively fast. I'll do it out of 1/2-inch square stock. The only difference between 1/2 inch and 1 inch is 1 inch takes a little more work and different tools. The other thing I thought I would do afterwards, and I'm pretty sure that we won't get these finished, but we'll get them as far as we can, and hopefully we'll get the joint done, which is the most important thing on these particular pair of pliers. They're called box joint pliers, and it's a little exercise in slitting and drifting a small hole. So on an angle, and I found a pair of these over in a flea market in Murphy, North Carolina, and I bought them for $1. And I looked at them and how did they do that? And so I went home and I spent 4 days figuring out how they did it. After I got them done, and this was the first pair that I did. These were out of 1/2 inch. But a friend of mine, Anthony Goodrum, we were talking, and he said, I think there's an article in the Alabama Forge Council's newsletter about this. And then I remembered in 1989, I'd seen Peter Ross do a set down in Madison, Georgia. And so I looked in the bits, found the article, and I tried to do it Peter's way, and I couldn't get it to turn out the way I liked it, so I went back to my way. But I did use some of the same things that Peter used in it. Technique's basically the same, but they're interesting to make, and when I get bored, I make a set of box jaw pliers. So I thought this particular set's made out of 4140, and when we get done here with this horse head, we'll start on these. I carry a set in my pocket. I'll give this to Clay and we'll get started. But I carry a set in my pocket, and my 2 sons.
This end high?
Yes, this end right here. And what I'm going to do, I'll do this slow and try to explain it each step. But basically what I'm going to do is draw the nose out of the horse like this. This will be my first one. I'll form this shoulder right here, the second one back here. With a horse head, it's real easy to get too much snout on them. And I had said Thursday about making horse heads. I spent about 3 months learning to make a horse head that I liked, that looked similar to a horse. Everybody knows what a horse looks like. So in my opinion, a horse is harder than a dragon, because they could go out in the field along the road and see a horse. They can't do that with a dragon. The first thing in the classes I teach, the first exercise is making a horse head. And what I want to do is I want to frustrate the students, because then they'll see, then I tell them we'll do a dragon, which is easier. But the whole thing to this process that I'm going to go through is just think of it as a process. Step 1, step 2, and step 3. And it'll come out pretty good. I'm going to do it on the square edge of the anvil. Generally what I do is lay it on there, and what I think I need, I pull it back a little bit. As far as dimensions go, it's probably about 3/8 of an inch that I'm forming the the shoulder on the anvil. Starting that shoulder on the square edge like. Then, and this is something that people get mixed up, it's kind of the same way as making tongs. You go to the near side, far side of the anvil. Come in and cut the back. What works for me, this is a spring swedge. If any of you are welders, you know that welding to spring steel is not a good, it doesn't make for a good weld, but if you preheat, that's 5160. If you preheat it and weld it, this particular one has been welded on there for probably 6-8 years. That's the only tool in a class that I don't let the students use. Here it's a case of a little more than what you think you need. You ought to start seeing a horse. What I'm shooting for is, if you look down, if I sight down the side of that spring fuller, I don't want that much metal sticking out there. I want it basically flush. If you could see that. And this is critical. There's not a lot in this stuff that's critical, but that is, because you'll end up, when I was trying to learn how to do a horse head, every night I'd work for about an hour or hour and a half and make a horse head. I had a pile of horse heads when I got, until I got one that I liked. Jim Batson, which used to teach a class before Clay did, he used to make a horse head. I'd look in the bits and try his technique. It wouldn't work for me. Once I found one that I liked, then I had to be able to duplicate it. It's easy to make the first one. The second one, making it look like that one, is a little tougher. And after I found my process that worked, I had to be able to teach that to students. So what I'm going to do is come in here and fuller this. You'll notice I'm turning it over. The top moves more than the bottom. I want it symmetrical. I'll stop there, but I generally, you can see these fuller marks right here. I've got enough heat left. What I'm going to do is come in and break these corners. That's going to do two things for me. See how I broke? Broke that corner. Now, depending on what kind of horse you're making, if this was going to be a workhorse, I'd leave this flared out here like this. But we're making a thoroughbred. So what I'm going to do is draw this on, take this large piece of metal right here, flatten it on down. 15 minutes is usually what it takes me.
Good job. Yes, sir.
15 minutes is usually what it takes me. Once I do the horse head, then I draw it out and let her open under the little giant and throw it off on the side. And these are, like I said the other day, these are Christmas presents for my clients. And that's just something around Christmas that I mail it to them, and they think of me when they open their bills. I said earlier, this is the only tool that I don't let the students use. Reason being, I think this is about 9/16, and it's spring. And I was letting the students use that, and some people tend to get carried away. And work on cold iron. And when the class was over, my spring swedge looked like this. And all I did was knock that hump down. Now, the other thing I'm setting up, I'm putting a flat spot. I'm using that shoulder. I'm putting a flat spot. That's where the nostrils are going to be. With making these heads, you will, in a class, half on, half off blows. That's the whole secret to a lot of these heads, and you'll actually get tired of hearing me say half on, half off blow. For those of you that don't know what a half on, half off blow is, half my hammer is over the anvil, half of it's hanging out in the air. That forms a shoulder. Depending on where you want the shoulder, you go to the near or the far side of the anvil. Same kind of process as making tongs. I'm going to go to the vise on. Most of the work will be done in the vise. This is all set up. If you get the setup right, the end product will come out good. Eyes are tricky. I'll do these and then I'll talk a little bit about the tooling. You want the eyes in the center, or kind of on the, you don't want them directly on top of the head. You want them off to the side a little bit.
Can you show us your punch?
Yes. This punch it's a teardrop shaped punch, and when I was coming up with a horse eye that I liked, I made a punch up like this, and in my, can you zoom in on this? If you notice, it's teardrop shaped. And my thinking was, when I started out, the teardrop part, the thin part back here, was going to be to the front of the head. And that's the way I was doing it. I didn't like it. One day I grabbed it the wrong way and used it, and it worked better. And the reason it worked better was, this little small edge right here, the sharp edge on that 45 that I had, that flattened spot, that I started back here like this, and what that sharp edge does, it digs into the metal. You didn't see it, but when I started at an angle like this, and that sharp edge will cut in there, because when you're doing eye punches, especially on smaller stuff like this, they have a tendency to skip off. So what this does is I get it set in there and then turn it to mass up the metal for the eyeball. And it's all, you just have to practice. It's all in the technique. Smallest one I've ever done is 3/8. 3/8 is hard because you noticed when I did this eye, it wants to wander this way or that. I use this to kind of straighten it up, but 3/8 really wants to wander off. So that's the smallest one I've ever did. The biggest one's inch, I think, is the biggest head I ever did. But you can use the eye punch to your advantage to push that. If it goes to the left, come over on the left side and push it back to the right. Symmetrics is everything. Keep it straight as you can, and that's the same way with a lot of things. Okay, what I'll do now is we'll work on the mouth, and I'm going to use that small fuller that I used the other day on the buffalo. I just want to give him some lips. Just another little detail. Also, I'm going to crease his nose. I'm a little cold. I'm about 2/3 of the way down. Let's see. 2/3 of the way down the snout, where I cut the mouth. The fuller, all it did was just relieve the little metal there, and then I came in with a chisel. This one that I carry on my wallet chain here, you'll notice it's got a wide mouth. That's for opening beer bottles. It also comes from I like the design of the Broncos football team, and so I kind of took that into account and made that mouth. This particular one's made out of 5/8. Once you go up in size, you got to change the tooling. I'll punch the nostrils in. For me, the ears are the hardest part on the horse head.
Still working there?
That'll work. Those flat spots that I put in there, that's what I'm utilizing right now. I like big flared nostrils. The trick is to draw them back to one blow before they split. The trick is knowing when they're going to split. Not so much on this, but the dragon. Next step is the ears. I'm going to come in right behind the pupil of the eye, and I'm going to come in at an angle. What I'm trying to do is I want that ear to come up and in to the center. So my chisel, cutting it, I'm going to start here, come up and around.
You're actually catching that edge.
I'm catching that edge right there, right behind, and I have in some instances got too close to the pupil and half the pupil went to the eye. So, but there you can see Little flat, thin chisel. If you don't get the ears right, you make a tool to make them right. And I left this in the box with the hope that I won't have to use it, but what it is a little butcher tool. You come in there and stand them up. What I shoot for is perfection. I don't always get it, but if you shoot for it, sometimes you get lucky. When you do the ears, heat the top of the head in the fire. Terminate the cuts at about the same area. Now these turned out pretty close, but I want them to stand up a little more than what they are. So what I'm going to do with this tool here is I'm going to come right in here like this and stand them up a little bit. What I like, at this point, what I like is I like those ears standing way up because I can always knock them down. And you'll see that here in a second. Thing is, you don't want to burn the ears off now, just like we talked about the horns on the buffalo. You got to be careful with those fine little ears up there. They'll burn off. Questions?
Steve, is that your butcher tool you're using there?
This is the butcher tool. Yeah. And I'll stand it up. Again, I'm going slow. A lot of this stuff, the nostrils and the mouth, and usually the ears, I take a separate heat for them because I like them hot. Hammer control is everything. The one thing you do have to think about with standing these ears up, if this is going to be handheld, you don't want a sharp point on the end. But you can see how much, I just stood them up a little bit. My next step is what I'm going to do is I want this top really hot. But I got these ears sticking up here, so it puts the pressure on my fire tender, keep from burning them up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here on the anvil, hang the head right at the shoulder. One thing I missed a step, and I'm usually in the jaws of the horse. I put a little crease in there, and I do that on the anvil. And I'm going to try and do that with those ears up there and pull it down a little more. I got a little bit ahead of myself, and now that I got those ears on there, it's going to be tough. But we'll see what happens. This will be a good exercise in hammer control. There's two ways you can put that crease in there. You can take a small fuller, and I might even do that. But I hate picking up tools when I'm at the anvil, so I learned to do it at the anvil. Generally, I hit it right on top of the head, but since I got those ears sticking up there now, it's going to be tough. I'm going to try to hit it behind the ears and get a crease in there.
Use a puller or a set.
Let's try the You can see I pulled the jaws down a little bit. There's a little crease that I put in there. When you work with the hammer, generally, I'll work out here. I'm pulling with the top of my hammer head. When I flip it, I'm pushing. Now, so in the tape, do this step that I just did before you do the ears. Now we're going to draw out the mane. Mane's going to be done the same way as the jaws I just did. I'm going to hang the head over the far side of the anvil. And what I do is I start back farther than what I think I need, and I work up towards the ears. I'm just working that way. I don't want to hit the ears. If I start right at the ears, there's a good tendency that you're going to hit them. I do want them to come in a little bit, but I want them to come in when I want them to come in, if that makes any sense. If you were going to do this, one fellow was going to do it on, he was a farrier, was going to make horseshoes. I don't know if he's here, but you can do the same process on a flat bar, which you just don't have the 3-dimension. Okay, I'm hanging over the anvil. I'm starting back here. I'm working up towards the ears. Now I'm pulling. I'm also rounding up the neck a little bit. Like I said the other day, there's no square corners in nature. Getting a little cold now, but you can see how I pulled that in. Again, it was this way. I'm at the back of my hammer. This way, I'm pulling it. The thinner you get this, the better the end result's going to be. If it splits, so be it. You're going to put hair in it. And the split will look just like hair. I'll do the hair. Generally, I work in my shop by myself when I'm doing the forging. I utilize a treadle hammer. We'll pull that out a little bit and see the colder the metal is when you chisel the hair in, the finer the hair. What I'm looking for is I want this fairly symmetrical, centered. The head starts to cock, and And a lot of times I'll just leave it cocked so it looks like the horse's head's turned. If I don't want it cocked, I just work it pretty centered. You can see that head's twisted a little bit. That's fine. Now I'm just working on the edge. You can pull this out as long as you want. If you want to put the scalp lock, I guess they call it. I'm not a horse guy. I just, but horses have hair that hangs down between their ears. You can flatten a little farther up here, cut it and put it down there. On these 1/2 inch horse heads, that's really tough. So I don't worry about it. We'll put the hair in it and fold the mane over. Chisel, H13. This one's looking kind of dull, but we'll get by with it. It's just a scrap cut off. Like I said the other day, preheat it, weld it, just don't weld it all the way around.
Will you go over the preheating process? Can you talk about the preheating a little bit?
Just like this is 5160, this is H13, this is high carbon, this is mild steel. Had I welded this cold, the first time I hit it, it would have bounced off. So what you do is you bring it up. I generally bring this up to about red, walk back to my welding table. It's cooled down some by then, and I weld it. And same way with this. Preheat, what would you say the other day, preheat for 1,000 degrees. If you don't do that, it will, as soon as first time you hit it, it'll break because it's, the metal's cold.
Rob Gunner says to preheat it, you use nickel rod and the nickel flows in.
Nickel's expensive. I did that with the MIG welder, H13 or 7018 works. Shoot not to cut all the way through. 2 reasons. It'll mark up your table, your anvil on your treadle hammer. You can do this by hand on the, if you don't have a treadle hammer, it's just a little trickier. All I'm looking for is some lines in there so that people look at it and they see its hair. If it's split, generally it'll split on the end. That just makes it a little more realistic in my opinion. I said earlier I'm not a horse guy. I have owned a couple horses. I inherited them from my son. He got the wild idea that he wanted a couple horses. So he got a couple horses. Well, guess what? We had 3 horses. The one was pregnant. And so I inherited them. They were in my front pasture, and every day I'd go out there and give them a treat and look at them. And I'd just stand there and study them and look at the detail on them and think about how I could incorporate that detail from that head into a tool to make it look more realistic. Got the hair in it. I'm going to fold it over. I spent all that time putting those lines in there. If I hit it with a steel hammer, it's going to flatten them out. Wood mallet. This wood mallet, I've had it for, as you can tell, for probably a long time. I had a fellow in my class from Florida that we used this wood mallet. He went home and made me a real pretty wood mallet out of dogwood. I don't know if you Got dogwoods out here, but it's a flowering tree. The next year he came back and took my class. I drug out that wood mallet, and he said, "Where's the one I made you?" I said, "Well, it's too pretty to use. It's hanging on the wall of my shop." You can see I just folded it over. I gave one of these. Now here's a case of where, thinking about what it's going to be, it's going to be handheld. So there's a little sharp point sticking up there. I'm going to come to the horn. This also shows you what the steel does to it. It just flattens it. And if you did what I did with the wood mallet, with that, it would flatten all that. Again, wire brushing. I've not did much on this, but the more you can wire brush, the better off you are. We'll go ahead, and the horse head is basically done. I'm finished with it. I'm going to isolate the head, and I'll draw down into the little giant to a letter opener, and we'll be done with that. I've done this a couple ways. I've cut it off, then drew it out, but I got to hold the horse head in, and what the tendency is to smash the ears because they get hot. So generally I'll draw it out, just a rough shape of a letter opener, and any final forming, an edge or anything, I'll just hit it with a grinder, and because again, these are, yeah, give me a little bit right back in here. I just isolated that metal. Now he's going south a little bit. I'm going to bring that back. Now we're going to heat this area right here, and I'll draw it out on the little giant. You need a glove? Is that getting hot? I'm all right, but I got a glove on. Generally, when I draw something out, for me, it's easier to start at the skinny end and work back. But in this case, I'm reversing that. That's the one thing I don't like about leaving it on, but it works out a little better. I will have to grab the head some, but the least amount that I have to grab that head and take a chance on marking it up, the better I like it. got the basic shape of a letter opener. Still a little thick on the end. We'll heat that up, take it out, cut it, and finish the tip. If you don't have a power hammer, anvil and a hammer will work.
Are you done with the little guy?
No. Okay, we got some heat, not much, but I just trued it up, and again, it's broke it off. We'll heat just the tip of it in the fire. These tongs that I got here, they're the old style off-center tongs. I bought 5 of them. I'd seen people use them. I bought those probably 15 years ago, and I always thought they were too small. But when I built my new shop, I've got a pile of tongs in my old shop. When I first got into this, I bought every set of tongs I could find. You don't need all those tongs. I left a pile up in my old shop, took those down and about 5 or 6 other ones for bigger stock, and I thought as I need them, I'll bring them down. I built my shop in 2005, and I haven't moved another set of tongs down to the new shop since then. These things, I try to do too much with them, but they're really nice. Now this edge, the knife edge, you could hammer it down. Generally what I do is take a grinder, just run the edge down there, point it a little bit, and it's done. Last thing I'll do is put my touch mark in it. Bend a little bit. What I do after I put the edge on it, since it's shiny, I throw it back in the fire. And I used to grind it completely smooth. I don't mess with it anymore. I just leave the hammer marks in it. The one story that I got about hammer marks is I was down in Australia teaching a class down there, and that's good, we're done with it. I made a dragon-headed back scratcher, and this old blacksmith came in. It was a demonstration day for the public. This old blacksmith came in. I left all the hammer marks in the shaft of the back scratcher, and because I was concentrating on the dragon head, he picked that piece up and he looked at it and he looked at all those hammer marks in that about a 1/4 inch shaft, 3/8, and he said, "Yank," he said, "this would have never came out of my shop." And I said, "Well, back in the States, they like hammer marks." And that was proven by the guy that had brought me down there. What I'm looking for is a 5/8 piece of stock there. He came over and he took some classes at Campbell, and in Australia they're taught in the European way of hand file and everything.
Can we leave your lid up? Much quieter.
I'm going to go ahead and quench this and you can pass it around. Generally I wire brush these, and here you go, Scott. I wire brush them and spray them with clear lacquer. But anyway, Ron had came to the States and he was draw filing everything he made. And they told him, I said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "Well, that's the way I was taught." He said, "Well, leave some hammer marks in it. It'll look like it's handmade." And so they have down there what they call market, which is basically a craft show. And he left the hammer marks in his stuff, and his sales went up 50% in the at the crafts fairs. Okay, questions? What?
Have that hammer over there.
You got to talk to this guy. What I'm going to do now is we'll start the box jaw pliers. This is 4140. This is just mild steel. You'll notice, I'll pass these around, you'll notice that these are on an angle. This set of pliers has one specific use. These little tabs on this wheel, these are three and a half a piece. I save the metal inserts, buy the cheap ones, bend these tabs back, put them on that. So, and these stay in my toolbox. That's why they're bent like that. But this is a small set. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this 5/8 shaft down to 5/8 by 1/2. I want a rectangle. Get it? You can pass them around. This particular operation here can go south real quick. So is the blue, can I use the blue?
On the wall, man.
Yep.
Pull this guy down too.
What I've got, half that way, 5/8 this way. We got any women's livers in the audience? They might not like my next statement. I'm going to make the male first. The female has to follow. I'm going to make the male to fit the, or I'll make the female to fit the male. Maybe. This might be a case of, oh, here it is. What I'm going to do, spring fuller, I'll use that under the treadle hammer. Here's what we're looking for. I'm working on this one right now. When Peter Ross does this, he uses a piece of 1/4-inch rod, another one on the bottom of fuller, and hammers it down. I like this in the treadle hammer. Basically what I do is I stick it in at an angle and fuller that down. You can pass those around. Depending on what the jaws are going to be, is how much metal I leave hang over the anvil. Again, I'm a half on, half off blow. Sharp edge of the anvil. Just like you're making a set of tongs. I'll work on that a little bit more. Again, Ernie Doyle, his idea to keep himself slowed down is to put a toothpick in his mouth. Reminds him, take your time. This is, the fastest I can make one of these is an hour and 15 minutes. And the first pair that I bought at a flea market was I paid $1 for it. So, I've only sold one pair. I don't generally sell them, and the only reason I sold this pair was a guy he absolutely wanted to buy them. Generally what I'll do, no, I didn't sell it for $1. I sold it for 50 bucks is what I sold them for. My shop rate's $50 an hour. Generally what I do is I like making these things, and I'll give them to certain individuals that have made an impression on me. Point being, if you're going to try to make box jaw pliers and make a living, I hope you're not plan on living high on the hog. Okay. When I was getting ready for this demo, I did a horse head, and I came back and I was going to do a set of box jaw tongs. And I was still in the horse head mode. So I did this step right here. I came over to the far side of the anvil and I did that step right there, and I looked at that and I thought, something don't look right. And that pair that I got hanging or on the wire that we passed around, they hang right behind my forge. And I thought, this something ain't right here. And I turned and looked, and it was like, oh, you idiot. So what you want to do is come over here. Same way in tongs, people get mixed up which way to roll it. What you want to do is roll it over this way. And what I found that works for me with using this 5/8 by half is I'll come in here, take this steel rule, and right here at this shoulder, I'll put my mark on there, or I won't put a mark on it. I'll turn it around and on the sharp edge of the anvil, and then I'll pull it away and hammer that down right there. You can mark it if you want to be real precise, but I'm usually kind of in a hurry when I'm doing that, and it's kind of a hassle. What I do is on this one, I do it an inch, or no, this one goes 3/4. The other one that we're going to slit and drift, I make it an inch. And it seems to work out pretty good for me. But that was back in Tennessee, and this is Colorado, so we'll see what happens. The altitude might affect it.
That sounds like a built-in excuse.
Hey, you always got to hedge your bet. My philosophy is you got to have more metal than you need, so I'm setting this up for an excuse. Okay, here we come. I'm at 3/4. I'm going to hold it right there. Flatten it back out. I'm just tweaking. Looks like a set of tongs. Now what I'm going to do is, I think I can do it with that hardy hole in the treadle hammer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fuller that at an angle somewhere like that.
You want a plate for the bottom of that treadle hammer?
If they've got one.
Oh yeah, they got one.
What I did when I first started making these, my thought was,
It's on the floor.
my thought was I'll shape these all up, get them just like I want them, and then drift them. Well, it changes, so I don't get too particular with this. I fuller it, I'll stretch it out a little bit, do some filing on it. In fact, I'll probably do a lot of filing on it. What I found that works good for filing, big square file. When we get into making the female piece, take a lot of time in fitting this together. You're still going to stretch it out and it's going to completely change shape, but it seems to work better if you get everything precise before you swell it out. It still amazes me that you can swell that thing out and it looks like crap, and then when you close it back up, it turns out. What I shoot for in these pliers is I don't want to see a big gap. I'm going from corner, shoulder to shoulder. Since the top moves more, I want to keep it fairly symmetrical. It'll grow real fast when you're fuller in this. The wider you get it now, the better off you'll be, unless of course you like to file. I don't like to file. Just like that slot in the group project. Some of you that were here when we did that last night, filing is a pain.
Is that why you're frowning then?
I didn't hear the question.
Is that why you're frowning then?
That's why I'm what?
Frowning.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'll do is, I've got this shoulder punched in there. You don't want to get too thick. See it, there's some marks in there. And what I like is this file to fit in there. This is kind of my gauge on how much I need in a slot. I'll dress this up some, and then we'll, this is the easy one. The tricky one is slitting and drifting that hole basically through the size that it was before I fullered it down. That's tricky. I'm going to fuller this a little bit more. It's a little thicker than what I would like. That's good. I am going to true it up a little bit. I'm just sliding it back and forth through the fuller. You can go with a wider fuller at this point. But you can also utilize just one tool. That's what I'm gonna go with. I'll file those marks out of there. Thank you. And then we'll cut that piece off, and I'll probably draw the reins out a little bit, and we'll leave it alone. What I'm looking for is a nice square edge right there and a flat surface in the middle. When I did the first set, you can pass these around. I don't know if those other ones had, but you can see those little, like a pair of pliers has got little cross hatches in them. I filed those in on the first set, and like I said, I don't like filing. So what I did was found an old file that I had, and I use it for putting those teeth in there. I hit the end of it. I lay the file on the anvil and hit it. Lay it on top of it, hit it, and it transfers the file marks into the jaws of the pliers. Point being, you could file it if you want to, but if you like filing, the one thing I'm looking for here is I want my termination or my shoulder to be relatively straight across. This one is a little farther forward, so it needs a little dressing. But this is what you're looking for. You want a straight line across there. Just heat from here. What I'm going to do now is cut it off, draw out the range, and hopefully we're done with this piece. There might be a little tweaking we got to do, but then we'll take the next step, just like the first, forming the jaws. Then the interesting part will be punching the holes.
Are you going to draw it out on this?
I'll probably I'd rather use the blue if, you could measure this, try to get them both exactly the same. I just eyeball them. Usually it's about a width and a half of my hammer back from the shoulder is where I started, or I flattened it down. So that's kind of my gauge. 1.5 to 2 times the hammer, depending on what kind of tong or pliers you're making. we'll leave that alone. See, I just drew it out. I'm going to do some finishing on that, but that gives me it's a little crooked, but you'll notice up here I kind of formed a shoulder and an angle. The pair I bought, they had a little offset like that rather than being straight, and so I try to accommodate that. We're just going to lay those, they probably won't stay there, but we'll lay that there, and you might have to have a set of tongs. I don't know, we're getting pretty warm. This was just a scrap piece that I picked up in the shop and threw it in. Same process, only it's an inch. How are we doing on time? I did a set of these in Madison. We didn't get the handles finished, and Clay bought them at the auction, and I thought I was going to be a smarty. One time he had made his toilet paper holder for the auction over at Campbell, and I bought it, and when we went up to pay, he told me, he said, I'm going to tell you like Francis told me. He said, I'd have made you one for a lot cheaper than that. So anyway, we were standing, I went up to him down there. I thought, being kind of smart aleck, I walked up to him and said, I'd have made you a set cheaper than that. And they weren't finished. We had the box jaw in them. He said, well, here, finish them then. So I had to go home and dress them all up and send them to him. What I'm looking for is I want basically the same thickness of that jaw as the other one. Again, the length I don't care about. They could get chopped off. I want the width to look basically the same. One thing I discovered in making these is, and this one's a little bit the same way, if you'll notice, if you look down that jaw, it's tilted, it's thicker on one side than the other. And what I've discovered is, I have a habit of, when I'm dressing it up, I always turn it this way, and I'm hammering right here, and it makes the top thicker. You got to hammer both ways because it pushes this metal out. And I was thinking I was holding it cocked on the anvil, and so that's just a little thing that I do that become a habit, but that shows you what hammering on one side will do. It'll change things that you don't think it would.
5/8.
It was 5/8 to start with. I made it 5/8 by a half. Okay, we got a little heat left. We'll get it marked. I'm going to go with a 1 inch right now. I'll stop right there. You saw how that jumped. A lot of people, what I see is, even though it jumps, they keep hammering on it. Don't do that. I got the shoulder started. We'll get a little more heat. If it bounces, stop, pull it back to where you can feel it catch that anvil. That's true in everything, especially when you're forming a shoulder. Rather than making a slitter and a drift every time that I do these for a demo, I made up some drifts. These are slitters. These are H13, these are S7. Reason I chose the S7 for the drift was because I'm going to be beating on it. And S7's a shock. Okay, I'm going to feel that groove there. Let's see if I'm about 15/16 on that. So I shot for 1 inch and I got 15/16. But you can see, same thing as we had with the other one. Now, this is a tricky part. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to slit that down through and come out back here. I'm going to go from both ways, but this is kind of tricky. Now, what and I'll do it the same way I do it in the shop. I've tried it with leaving a handle on it and holding it between my legs and holding it, but it seems to work better this way. And I've got a double horned anvil that doesn't have a step in it. So what I do is drop that in there. I'll cut that off. And rather than draw the range down now, I'm going to leave it thicker because I'm going to be punching on it. If it's thinner, it's going to want to wander around. So I'm going to leave it thick and punch it, drift it, and then I'll draw the reins out.
I can hold it for you.
I think it'll work a little better like this, I think. I could be wrong. Generally what I use when I do this in the shop is I got to cut off harding with a straight edge. on one side, and I'll use a straight edge towards the business end of this piece because I want a relatively flat surface to come in contact with my block. Now I'm just gonna we'll try it with fastest way, I guess, is heat that up. I'm gonna take that little rag off of there with a hot rasp. One other reason I found that I like the short piece is I'm gonna quench both ends of this as I'm working on it. And if it's short, it works better. The other thing that I found that works good for slitting and drifting is this stuff right here. And what it is, it's called seed slick. It's basically graphite that they use when they're planting soybeans or corn. They put it in the hopper with the seeds so that they slide better. And you mix it with water, and I've done it both ways, with or without. It makes one heck of a difference. You see, I just took that butter off of there. Reason being, I'm going to be butting that up against that. And I wanted a good surface. When you're slitting and drifting, shoot for the center of it. Just like that slit and drifted hole right there. On something that big, you can work it a little bit, but on this, you got to pretty well be on true coming through there. So you get off on a big piece, you can quench one side and the other side will stretch, but on this, that ain't happening. No. I don't like drilling. But you could. I'll get it started. Take your time. When it gets cold, stop. Just like I said on the horns, you'll start fulling it instead of slitting it. But you can see I'm pretty well centered on that. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'll quench this side of it. Lay that against my stop, come in this way.
Do you mark your chisels for what the tool, what the alloy is, so you remember?
I've got one chisel here that's marked, and it's in the box, but it's S7. And the only reason I did that was so I would know compare it to the H13 that I use, and I can't tell the difference between the chisel of S7 and I've got a number of these, and I don't know. This one I know is H13. This one's not marked, so it's H13, but these are for cutting the horns in the Dragon. I'm in there a lot, and so that's why I use them. So I thought I'd try S7 and see how it works. A2 works. I've got some that are A2. Anything that's an air hardening tool steel. Take your time on this step. This is probably the most critical part of the whole rodeo. I got a little bit off on this one. I didn't quench this tip, but see, this side's a little fatter than that side over there, but this side's pretty good. I'm just going to keep doing that. You got to remember which side you went. What I like to do is alternate from one side to the other. So now this time I'm going to come from the top when it's good and hot. But probably the most critical part is what I'm at right now, for me. What is this? Yeah. It's called Siege Slick, but it's basic, it's graphite. And you can buy, the farm supply stores sell it in like 5-gallon buckets. Well, I didn't need 5 gallons, so John Deere sells a small bottle, about a pound of it, and it's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 bucks, I think, something like that. So I got that and just mix it with water, and it makes a difference. I'm hesitant to use it on my Slitting chisel, but it does work. But that's H13, and like I said the other day, H13 will soften at a blood red, and I definitely don't want this to soften. You see it's just don't get in a hurry. We're starting to bulge out. I see a bulge right in the hole. So we're getting close. But again, don't get in a hurry.
What do you do when you come up against it? You're punching from the same side, against each other.
What?
Yeah, what do you do when you come up against it? You're punching from one side then the other.
I'll turn it over and eventually it'll split through there. I'm punching a hole.
You're pushing mass against itself, aren't you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Generally punching a hole, what I'll do is, not so much with a Slitting chisel, but if I was punching a round hole, I'll punch till I feel it bottom out hard against the anvil. And then if there's any heat left in it, I'll flip it over, and you'll see that little biscuit right there, thing. I'll just stand there and let it cool till it gets cold. Then I'll hit it, it'll shear off, because metal shears in the black heat. If it's hot, it stretches. A lot of times the trick is remembering which side you did. You'll feel it when it goes through. We're through right now, but I'm just gonna come a little bit more. What I'm looking to do is open that hole up for my slitter, or my drift. You look through that, you can see the hole. And as you can see, I didn't deform it too much, but it will deform some. Now what I'm going to do is these, you see these get kind of dull on the end from hitting them through. I'm just dipping a little bit in there. I'm going to start that in there like that. Drift about halfway through, then stop and drift from the other side. Don't get in a hurry. What I'm looking for, and I should have showed you that earlier, that's pretty close to my groove right there.
So how many drifts do you have? You have 3 drifts?
I've got 3. This is an insurance drift. It's not big enough. This one's not big enough. This one's a little fatter. The reason you could do it with 1 drift, but just make it smaller, like that one. It's a little easier to get that small started in there. This is kind of interesting too. Is getting that started in there. And keeping it in there. I'm going to go a little bit here at the vise, since I've got some heat. It's pretty cold right now, but we're started. We got it fit. I'll take a little more on that, and if I got enough heat, I'll flip it over and get it from the other side, but drift from both sides. Just take, what I've discovered is, if you don't drift from both sides, it will, you don't really want the metal to grow too much this way, and you want it more to grow out like this. And if I drifted all from one side, it didn't seem to work out. And I'm sure there's probably a technical reason for that, but I don't know what it is. Okay, I'm through. Now I'm taking my time. I'm going to come through. I got enough heat. You can see how red that got. Other thing I'm doing, We got the hole started. It's a little angled, but now we'll go to the next drift. Basically, all I'm looking for with that one is to get enough room so it's a little easier to put this big one in.
Is that the graphite that you use for locksmiths or kind of locks and stuff? Or?
Excuse me. I'm sure it would. I don't know. The fellow that told me about this was a fellow by the name of Ken Thomas. He teaches over at the folk school, and he had this stuff, and he said, try this. And Tom Clark used to sell some stuff, and if you all know Tom Clark was a pretty good salesman, and I was kind of the opinion, he had something needed mixed up. I was kind of the opinion, Tom promoted that stuff like it was gold, and but I have to admit, Tom was right. Lubricant helps when you're slitting and drifting. Make sure your vise is open enough that your drift will drift through. Just getting bigger and bigger. I want to stretch this metal a little bit. I'm probably have to take a heat just to the side. Might have enough here. One mistake that I've made is you'll notice these drifts are tapered down. If you get that on an angle when you're doing what I'm doing here, if you lay that up, if the flat's not, if you don't have clearance, when you hit that, this will crack right in half.
I just found the seat slick online in a 12-ounce bottle.
Okay.
But you have to buy 12 of them.
Well, you could,
Still $80.
yeah, you can go to, I got mine in a John Deere dealer. They sell it there. Tractor Supply's probably got it. Oh, well, you might not have Tractor Supply out here, but some co-op down here, they'd have something. It's kind of like that wetting agent that Rob Gunner uses in his mix. You got to buy, I got 5 gallon of the stuff that I bought, I don't know how many years ago. I'm we're just starting to shape that a little bit. You see, what I'm looking for is I basically want, we're pretty close on this. I want that to fit down in that groove. I'm going to do some hot rasping on it, get it shaped up, and I'll do a little more drifting. Then we'll mess it all up. I think what I'll do is I'll go, this one's a little wider. We'll stretch it a little more. And then you can do this with a grinder. It's a little faster. I'm not clamping on my drifted hole, staying back on the range. What I'm looking for is this to fit down in that groove. And it's a judgment call whether you file this a little more or file this a little more. I'm going to drift that. I'll probably file a little more on there and make it to fit.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. While you're heating that, I'll file this a little more. We're good one way, the other way we're not. Since I'm in a hurry, we're going to hit this with a sanding disc. Just a hair more and we'll be. That should do it. I'm going to hit this with a file one more time. I'd rather be too big than not big enough. And these aren't the drifts that I like, but I'll look. Let me see how this. Okay. Now, the trick is holding the drift in there. Getting it started. The one I was looking for is tapered to fit that hole. Hit that, Clay. Okay. I'll take a heat and I'll look for that other. What I've got is I got a tapered drift. It's tapered in this way rather than round. And I thought I threw it in here, but that might not have happened. I did throw it in here. It was in the wrong bag. This is what I'm looking for. I'll taper, where'd that drift go that I had? clip it. I need that small. Let me try this. Okay, take another heat. You just spent all this time trying to true this up, get it all pretty, and now you're messing it up. Drift from both sides. What I want to do is I'm drifting it big enough so this will slide through there. I think I got it now. Okay. Okay, we're pretty close, but we need a little more. We don't finish this. I'd like to get it to where we close it back up. Okay. I'll finish it at open forge or something like that. But basically what you do is you drift that hole till that fits through there and then close it back up. I drill it.
You don't like drilling?
It's a little bit. I don't mind some of it. I like drilling more than I like filing. Okay. Getting close. Probably hit that with a sander. Take it down some. We'll try it. Let me see if it, we're cheating here because we're running out of time. Okay. These might have a good long or wide. I'll draw that rein out real quick and then we'll put it together. I took a little too much off of that, but we'll see if we can stretch it in and fill the hole up. You'll get the idea. Generally what I do is before I put it together, I finish the handles and everything, because once you slam it together, you're done with it.
Steve, will you explain that real fast?
In a second. Okay. What was the question? What did I do with that?
Describe the process of closing. Describe the process of closing the joint.
Put it through the hole, smash the hole. Just put it through the right way. I haven't had the pleasure of putting one through the wrong way yet. There, we got it through. I'm a little big on the hole. Now I'm going to heat the whole thing. If you operate the draft, I'll
You pin this eventually?
put a pin through it, drill it. I countersink and flatten off the, hammer it down, flatten off the rivet, and the end result's what you see there. I was real particular when I first started making these that they had to go through just so, and I'd stop. Basically, if they didn't fit right here at this, if it wasn't filled up, I'd think, well, those are scrap. So one day what I did was, let's get a little hot. I thought, heck, I got a couple pair like this. I'm gonna smash the whole thing, and it worked out, so. It's kind of a self-forming joint. As you can see, they're working right now. This gap's a little bigger than what I generally like. But you get the idea. Then what I'll do, just work it back and forth to form the reins on it. I generally use a half round bottom swedge. I was feeling pretty cocky about these when I did them, till a guy showed me a pair done out of wood out of one piece. But where's those ones that I had?
These finished ones?
The finished ones, yeah.
Oh, here.
What I do, these are basically done, but what I do is I take a bottom swedge, and before I put them together, I put them in the bottom swedge so that I get a radius on them, and then I'll come to the amble with that, and over the horn of the amble, I'll heat them up, and over the horn of the amble, start here and start bending them around. So these are formed right on the horn of the amble like that. But the joint is the interesting part of it. Yeah. Since I'm going to drill these, I shouldn't do this, but I'll heat them back up before I drill them. And you can see they work even without a rivet. And it amazes me that you can, beat it, just swell it out like we did, even though I was precise on all that stuff, and that might not need to be, but then to misshape it as much as it was with that drift in there, then hammer it back together and have them. And the gap's not too bad. It's not as good as some of these, but and then after I'm finished, that's when I lay them over the file on the anvil and hit down on it, and that puts the wrinkles in it. Sorry it took a little longer, but we didn't get done, but hopefully you got the idea. And I want to thank the Rocky Mountain Smiths for inviting me out here. And I've met a lot of nice guys, and my shop's always open. If you get in Tennessee, you're more than welcome to come in.
So can you also put some more advice there with your tools?
Advice?
Hey guys, can I interrupt just a minute? I'm missing a pair of bifocal safety glasses that were on the corner over there when we started the demonstration. I had to leave to get my notepad, and when I come back, they were gone. I can't